An American ninja? There's no such thing. Welcome to my dojo. This is Kung Fu Pizza Party, and I'm your host, Brandon Knight. And today, to celebrate International Ninja Day, I am here to review the 1980s cult classic film, American Ninja, starring Michael Dudikoff. Welcome to the show, everybody. Yes, yesterday actually was International Ninja Day. I hope you celebrated properly. I don't know exactly what that would be, though I am a worker for Ninja Zone. I did feel honored to be there to work and to represent a version, a depiction of ninja life. And today we're also going to be reviewing a film that I guess kind of depicts ninja life in a way. There's a lot to unpack here when it comes to the ninja, because I don't even know really where to start. This episode is really going to be, instead of like the fragmented version that I do here on the show of here's your martial arts cinema history lesson and a review of the film, and let's go back and talk about the quote I opened the show with and what did I think of this movie. I don't know how to have this conversation this way, that way. It's going to be kind of a hodgepodge here on the show today. Partially because I think the quote that I opened here today is actually spoken by the villain, who is shocked to find out that a white dude is a ninja. There's no such thing as an American ninja. I think that really captures an even bigger conversation point of what is ninja, and even bigger than that, how do we teach our history? How do we understand our history? Because here's why. In the 1980s, in the B-movie genre category, ninja was a big deal thing. The ninja films became a big deal thing. And a lot of times in this martial art movie genre, the martial art movie genre can sometimes be a situation of which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. Because there are times where the movies that are made are inspired by what the popular styles are at the time, or sometimes the popular styles during that decade are dependent upon what are the popular films being made. Every decade has like its all-star lineup, right? Because like in the 80s, we're here in the 80s right now, so that's going to be Chuck Norris is going to be one of the big guys. Jean-Claude Van Damme and also Jackie Chan are starting to become more household names, or definitely going to be by the time you get to the 90s. Like there's these people who, we think of them in a certain decade. Bruce Lee, of course, is timeless, but Bruce Lee is in the 70s, right? You go back to like the 50s and 60s. That's when you start seeing samurai. Samurai had its time, had its moment in the sun. Also, certain styles come up, especially in the 80s, because we're here today to talk about the boom of the ninja. Depiction of ninjutsu in film. But the other big one from the 80s is, of course, karate. Because not only did you have Chuck Norris starting to become a household name, you also had the birth of the iconic Karate Kid franchise. And it's from there that we get all the karate schools that we have now. Or, not so much in the world of film, but the popularity of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai now, and how common it is to find those in gyms and dojos and studios, is in part thanks to the popularity of the UFC and mixed martial arts in its rise in the 90s and early 2000s. So there's a little bit of this which came first, the chicken or the egg situation for me when it comes to ninja, because it seems like during this, there's always been like written material on the ninja, but it seems like it is during the 80s when ninjutsu has its boom. And you have this boom of the these B films like American Ninja and all of its subsequent sequels. This is the beginning of a whole film franchise here, and other films as well. There's one I'm really looking forward to reviewing in the future. Probably going to have one of my brothers on to talk about Phantom Raiders. But it's what's interesting to me about the study of ninja, whether it's ninjutsu or I was in a hybrid class environment studying Hapkido and Ninpo Taijutsu of the Bujinkan dojo under Master Hatsumi. I did not train under Hatsumi, but part of his school of thought. So I've dipped my toe as a student into this world, and of course now I'm doing Ninja Zone for my profession. And what's interesting to me about really more so the actual martial arts, or the styles that claim to be actual martial arts, is that sometimes for me it gets a little blurry as to what is actually historical and what is, as I kind of talked about there a little bit ago, what is historical and what is what we want to be historical. Here in the United States, I know there's a more of an international audience here, but here in the United States, we have been confronted a lot, and we've finally started listening within the past few years of how whitewashed our history is. And we've been confronted with the reality that people like Christopher Columbus wasn't actually that great of a person. And yeah, I could go on, but just as a white man, I've been confronted over the past few years of the history versus the history that actually happened. History versus how it actually played out. The stories we tell ourselves versus the actual historical events. There's that famous quote. I think it's one of those that gets miscontributed a lot, so I'm not going to try and contribute it to anybody, but it's the famous quote of history is written by the victors. Unless it's the Greece-Persian War, then history is written by Frank Miller. History is written by the victors, and so there are going to be times where history is going to be skewed, and at some point we all just continue to regurgitate history upon history of stories, not necessarily the actual event, but the stories we just start regurgitating until the point where those are the historical fact versus what is truly the historical fact. And sometimes I just question the historicalness of especially here with American Ninja. I really question the historicalness of any of the ninja stuff that goes on. And also in a lot of the written material that comes out within new ninjutsu and even within my own school with Ninpo Taijutsu. What I find interesting, especially in film, is that when you watch other fighting styles being depicted on screen, you can tell. When Steven Seagal is out there doing Aikido, you can tell that there is something specific going on there, Or insert any kung fu movie here, right? Like an actual 70s kung fu, Hong Kong, Shaw Brothers film, that is going to have kung fu. And you could tell that, right? And even like certain other people, like when Wesley Snipes is on screen, I know he's doing Taekwondo. I see those spin kicks. I know what he's doing. I see those jump kicks. There's something about ninja in how it's depicted that it is always less about any specific skill, any specific way that you throw a kick, a punch, or whatever, and an emphasis on weapons and agility. Here it's like, there's this not illegal underground, but this secret school that's going on that's training ninjas, and they're basically all just doing dive rolls and other like gymnastics things, and they have shuriken and their swords and doing their thing. I remember when I took Ninpo Taijutsu, it was more so a spiritual forward position. It was like more of like the spiritual. Hapkido, we were learning the techniques, and Ninpo Taijutsu was brought in for like the spiritual development aspect. But I learned how to do very specifically their way of doing a front kick. And then everything else, there wasn't anything different about the way that they did the combat part. Even Jeet Kune Do, which is more of a philosophy than it is a fighting style, has fighting style uniqueness to it. You know, the way that they do the front lead, the way that they do their lead punch. There's very specific ways that Jeet Kune Do is fought. With ninjutsu, Nippo Taijutsu, it's the acrobatics, it's the weaponry, it's, and Nippo Taijutsu does kind of have a little bit more of the philosophical, spiritual side to it, but it's just interesting to me that we have this thing, and it is possible that maybe we have just lost what it truly is because of this history that we have created around it, the mystique that we've created around it. And that, is very clearly depicted here in this movie with American Ninja. This movie is starring, like I said, Michael Dudikoff. He came in, he wasn't a martial artist at all, but the stunt guy, the guy who did the stunt work for this movie, it was... Sorry, not the stunt work, but the fight choreography was done by Mike Stone, who is famous for his tournament karate scene, doing stunt work, doing fight choreography for films, and most infamously having an affair with Priscilla Presley. Yes, that Priscilla Presley, like Elvis's wife, Priscilla. He was the fight choreographer for this movie, and he reassured the director that, yeah, it's going to be fine. He'll pick up on the techniques. And sure enough, Dudikoff did, and to the point where not only does he do really well in this movie, but he goes on throughout the rest of his life to train in karate, judo, aikido, and is really into Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's connected to the Gracie family now. And I love that. I'm kind of harping on this a little bit. I understand. And, maybe next International Ninja Day, I'll come at this with a little bit more, hey, let's have a great time talking about ninjas. But it does make my heart happy that somebody who came into a martial art movie with no prior training walked away being inspired to get into the martial arts. That makes me happy. It makes me happy when people get into the things that I like. Thank you for getting into this, Dudikoff. And not only did he start getting into the martial arts, but this was the movie that propelled him into a B action hero leading man. He went on to do at least one other of these American Ninja films. Like I said, this became a whole franchise, but he did several other military style films or ninja related films throughout the 80s. So good for you, man. I'm sure we'll run across you at some point in the future as well. This movie is directed by Sam Firstenberg, who was another big 80s cult B-movie director. He did several ninja films, did some military films, kind of ran the gamut, a horror movie here, a sci-fi flick there, all the usual B-movie stuff, and actually is still working. He was... Just this year, he was the pre-production director for The Last Kumite, which came out, I think that was over the summer, was when that one came out. So still working, and even Dudikoff, he still does work as well occasionally in film and television as well, which is cool. And the story of this movie is truly a tale as old as time. It's the story of a corrupt military officials getting involved with secret ninja terrorist groups to mutually benefit each other, and a white guy with amnesia but who retains all of his ninja training brings it down. Just the average tale as old as time kind of stuff going on here. It's a fine movie. If you're listening to this and you're a big American Ninja cult classic follower person, hey, good for you. The movie wasn't necessarily something I enjoyed watching. When it comes to the Would I watch it again? Would I buy a physical media copy of this movie? The answer is no, and it's not to both. The answer is no to both. And it's not necessarily that this was like a horrible film or anything. I'm not bougie. I like my fair share of cheesy cult classic films. I do. So the acting in this movie, it didn't bother me. It's not great, but it doesn't bother me. I think a big factor here is, just kind of where my head was at when it comes to this whole, who are the ninja, really? Like, are the stories that the myth, the legend that we have built up and even teach around the ninja, is that really who they were? But also, the other reason why I think it just took me out of this movie a little bit is that it's clearly an 80s action film. It is. And when I was in high school, I loved 80s action movies. But at some point, the appeal of the just stuff is constantly blowing up, over-the-top action, the one-liners, it just didn't continue to work for me. As much as I appreciate the original Predator film for spawning an amazing franchise, honestly, I'd rather watch Prey than Predator. And I'm sure somebody is going to cancel me for not being manly enough. Look, I love Schwarzenegger. I really do. I almost said Stallone just to make people even more angry. But no, I do love Schwarzenegger. I think he's great, especially like his more recent movies when he's kind of like aware of who he is now. But yeah, I would rather watch Prey than I would. There's just something about 80s films. I think part of it is the kind of like over the top American patriotism that comes up. I think sometimes it's the whole, just that like no plot, all action kind of thing. The first 15 minutes of this movie is just ninjas and terrorists attacking a military thing with no explanation as to why, and this scrawny white dude taking everybody down, and he doesn't also say anything for that first 15 minutes. So yeah, it's just not for me. I will say this, I'm willing to watch more. I don't know how many more, but I'm willing to watch at least American Ninja 2 to see how this continues on, and maybe I'll change my mind at some point. There are ninja films that I like, so I'm sure, and we're every International Ninja Day or at some point sooner, I'm sure we'll do more ninjas, probably in the form of turtles at some point. This isn't like me completely. I'm ruining International Ninja Day for you, aren't I? I'm not trying to completely dunk on how we depict ninja. And yes, there are times for let's just have fun. But I think, this quote, an American ninja, that there's no such thing. Like, maybe that's true. Maybe how we have always depicted ninjas, there's no such thing. Because we have created something that never really existed. And that the actual historical ninjas have been lost to history. I don't know. Maybe I sound like a conspiracy theorist right now. If I did, that doesn't normally happen. So I'm just going to sit in the moment and be a conspiracy theorist for everybody. I will say this, though. I know I've dunked on literally everything, but let me just say kudos to Mike Stone, because the fight choreography in this movie was fantastic. If you do like those 80s, just constant state of action fight sequences, you're going to love this movie. Seriously. If you're a no plot, all action kind of person, good for you. You should definitely go watch this movie. It's available for free on Tubi. That's where I streamed it. I love how all these streaming services are just going to keep getting free plugs until one of them, I'm looking at you, Haya, the one that is actually a martial art movie streaming service, starts sponsoring me. Anyway, so if you're one of those all action, no plot kind of people, you should go check this movie out, because the plot and action is, or it's not the plot, the action and fighting is really good. If I'm going to watch a ninja film of some sort, if I'm going to watch some kind of a ninja film, I am expecting nothing but high spots, to borrow from the professional wrestling world. I'm expecting nothing but over the top action. I'm not I'm not looking for, just a couple weeks ago, I reviewed The Big Boss. It has this iconic, great fight scene between Bruce Lee and the Big Boss at the end, where you get all these like intricate, very detailed fight sequence between the two of them. I'm not expecting that when I watch ninja films. What I am expecting is, I've just come to expect, the acrobatic shurikens, over the top action. And that's what this movie delivers on from like the get-go. It is nothing but over the top action, flying ninja rolls, shurikens going everywhere. He's catching arrows, snapping them, catching spears. I mean, it's really, fight-wise, it is really everything you would hope for in this kind of a movie. Very good fight choreography. If I can... And, we're getting here, we're at the 20-minute mark, so as I starting to wind this show down, if anything to be celebrated for this film is indeed the fight choreography, because it is, I don't want intricate fight sequences with this kind of thing. I want, over-the-top high spots, and that it does. And shout out to Dudikoff, because we all know you listen to the show. Shout out to Dudikoff, because he's really good with a butterfly knife. He's got, right from the get-go, when they first introduce him, he's, this new soldier on the base, and he's flipping a butterfly knife around that cool way with the handles. You know what I'm talking about. And, hey, he does it a couple times throughout the movie. It looks really good. Good job on that. Still learning how to do that, honestly. I've never quite have figured it out. So, yeah, I know that this whole episode has been kind of a hodgepodge, a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of big thoughts about a cult classic film from the 80s. Who would have thought? And yeah, I'm kind of ending it by saying, but hey, if we're going to just embrace the myth of the ninja, they do it well. If we're just going to embrace the myth of the ninja, hey, this movie is great. I've got some problems with it, but maybe that's just me. And that's what you got to deal with when you listen to a movie review show, is occasionally you have to hear some jerk say, you know what? I didn't really care for the thing that you like. And I'm sorry. If you think I'm a jerk, I apologize. Please do not attack me with shurikens. Well, that's really all I have for today's episode. So, and you know what? That's okay, because last week we went real long when Josh was on the show to review Shanghai Noon. This week, coming in a little bit shorter, making up for last week. But thank you all for listening. If you haven't yet already, please follow the show on Instagram at Kung Fu Pizza Party. And consider rating and reviewing the show wherever you get your podcasts. Since I've got a little bit of time, I'll say this, that make sure you are following the show on Instagram, because all throughout this month, every Sunday, I am going to highlight one of the top 5 episodes of all time here on the show. Of course, we've only been around since September, so you could actually probably guess what some of those episodes are. So far, announced has only been number 5, which was actually the challenge accepted 90-day black belt review that I did on Michelle Kerr's journey to earning a black belt in Taekwondo in 3 months' time. So if you haven't checked that one out, that was earlier in November, rather. And this coming Sunday, we'll announce number 4. And I gotta say, as a little bit of a tease, number 1 has, not only has it surprised me that number 1 is the number 1 movie, it has shocked me how popular this episode has been, how many times it has been downloaded, because I've been podcasting for almost 4 years now. I have never come even remotely close to the numbers this episode has drawn in. So just a tease, that's going to be the last Sunday of this month. You'll find out. So make sure you follow the show. And if you haven't yet already, check out my sister podcast, My Seminary Life, where I talk all things theology. And check out the other great shows here on the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network. Other great geeky shows like Systematic Geekology, Why I Don't Like, and Friday Night Frights, which reminds me, next week here on the show, it's going to be Friday the 13th next week. And got one more spooky episode for you. I know I've been dragging out spooky season for a while now. But one more spooky episode for you all for Friday the 13th. Christian Ashley is going to be back on the show from having reviewed The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. And we take 20-30 minutes to talk about our own pitches for our own martial art horror movies. It's a lot of fun. We got some wild ideas out there for you all. That's next week on the show. Then after that, the Christmas special is just right around the corner. And oh ho ho ho, am I excited for the movie I'm doing this year. But that's it for me. This has been Kung Fu Pizza Party, where we've delivered high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and served up some wisdom, one slice at a time.